Welcome back, listeners, to a brand new episode of the New Standard. And you're checking out the first breakdown show of 2024. You're checking out the Steelers versus Falcons breakdown. Please support your boy with a like and a subscribe. And please spread the word. Let's try to blow up the show and have a lot of fun this year. Want to apologize to Double H. I don't know why there were two episodes scheduled. Hey, it's just my faux pas, my bad. We're all working the kinks out, trying to get back and do our thing for the regular season. We're all trying to get it back. And before we hop into the breakdown of the game, we're going to jump into the Cam Hayward contract extension. We want to talk about that, the format for the show coming up this year. And to get your thoughts on the format of the show, please, I would like you to share your thoughts on the format that I'm going to discuss in the chat. And of course, we are going to break down the game. As always, if you want to listen to the show via podcast, the show is out there on all of the ways that you get your podcast. Do a search for the New Standard. And we do have Neil's pick for the game along with my pick for the game. Also, want to tease a new show that I'm going to be doing with my brother called Don't Trust These Picks, where we go through the entire slate of games and give you our picks, not straight up, but with the spread and giving you our picks. So again, thank you. Please like and subscribe. Hit that like button right now. But let's jump into the big Steeler news that came out in the last day or two, and that was the contract extension of Cam Hayward. Now, I'm going to take a different tack, right? I read a lot of different things on X, some different things on Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, and they're describing the deal like Cam Hayward, who signed a 3-year, $45 million extension. The details aren't over the cap. And in this scenario, normally I would go through the details. But when it comes to Cam Hayward, I'm not sure the details of the contract are important. He's one of those guys that, and I often don't say this and often don't subscribe to this, but some guys deserve the bag for services rendered. Now, most players aren't in situations where they could get paid for services rendered and being Mr. Steeler or Mr. Jag or Mr. Falcon or Mr. Raven. But if anybody is going to be given the benefit of the doubt and get paid for past stuff, not necessarily future performance, it's going to be Cam Hayward. At this point in time, it used to be Ben Roethlisberger embodied what being a Steeler was about. Now it's Cam Hayward. You can't kick guys like that in the ass and get rid of them. He deserves the contract because he embodies what black and gold is. He embodies that. So this is more than just football, this decision. He's an ambassador for the Steelers. He's what it means to represent the black and gold. So I'm happy for Cam that he got this contract extension. And from a football perspective, let's not get it twisted. When healthy, he's their best defensive lineman. The question is, only question with this deal is his age, and if he will stay healthy, and if his best football is behind him. But I'm fine. I'm fine that they give him his money. They do the extension this year. He retires a Steeler. I think it's very important that certain guys, if they can, retire in the uniform that they started with. Let me give you some particulars and details on the deal. 3-year, $45 million deal, as reported by Ian Rappaport. The contract includes $29 million in new money, nearly $15 million as signing, and $16 million fully guaranteed. The $16 million is the number he was going to get this year anyway. And so we'll see what happens. He is still very much a very valued player, and he just handles business appropriately. He's the type of guy that you want representing your organization, and I'm just ecstatic that they got the deal done, and that his last years of football will be done in a Steeler uniform. I'm glad he was not dealt with like he was just any other guy, because Cam Hayward isn't any other guy. But before we jump into the picks and the breakdown for the game, one thing I'm going to do this year, and Neil suggested that I do it, and I think I'm going to settle on doing the show on Wednesday. We're going to do the pregame breakdown on Wednesday. Big up to Ollie Howard, Species, Double H, everybody out there. Because I want to incorporate the comments of Mike Tomlin into the program and into the breakdown. Now, I'm very well aware, having done this for a while and listened to coaches' press conferences, they aren't going to give away their game plans, but their comments will give you a clue to what's important as they look at and develop a framework that goes into a game plan for playing the opponent. They will mention particular names in the press conference or in their lead up statements before they start taking questions, which, in my opinion, will give you a lens as to what they're thinking is important from a matchup perspective, and just from an overall schematic and an overall perspective of the game, what's important, what they need to focus on, the things that they have to do to be successful in the game. I think is very illuminating, particularly in a game like this in week one, where you don't have a lot of tape on your opponent. And the only way that you would have a lot of tape on your opponent is if you were playing a divisional opponent. Like, I believe the Raiders are playing a divisional game in the opening weekend. Like, that would be a situation where there's a lot of familiarity that you have with your opponent and with the coaching staff being relatively the same. So in looking at this game, so again, I'm going to be using a lot of, and that's why I'm going to do it on Wednesday, I'm going to use a lot of Coach Tomlin's thoughts in his press conference to help guide my thoughts about the game. Because it doesn't matter what I think necessarily, it's what the coaching staff thinks. And if I can tap into their thoughts by listening to the press conference, I want to. Typically on the show, on the pregame show, we're going to go into the final game thoughts from the previous game. We're going to talk about Tomlin's press conference, some hot news, and we're going to break down the upcoming game as well as give you predictions. I think in listening to Mike Tomlin's press conference, and one thing that jumps out at me in this game was, and based on what he was talking about, was to win this game on the road, the Steelers have to play very clean football. He said it over and over and over again that they have to eliminate stuff like pre-snap penalties. They have to not shoot themselves on the foot and play a very, very clean game. The one thing that's also a big concern of his when he talked about this game was the rotation and about the offensive line and the rotation of the offensive line, as he brought up Ike Simalu's injury and who was going to replace him. He said it was going to be Spencer Anderson. He also said that Broderick Jones would still be slotted at right tackle, but there is still a lot of flux, particularly in this game on the road when you look at the left side of this offensive line. You might have Dan Moore, you might have the rookie Big Troy, you've got Spencer Anderson, and you've got Zach Frazier. Any iteration and combination of that is an issue on the road. And Mike Tomlin, in his press conference, spent plenty of time giving props to Matt Judon. He gave props to Matt Judon over and over and over again. So you know that the emphasis and a focus in their preparation is one, running the ball effectively, staying on schedule, not being in obvious third down passing situations, and figuring out how to block and pass protect and block Matt Judon. That is something that they are absolutely going to feature. The other thing that they talked about, or Mike Tomlin talked about, was the safeties. That he was particularly impressed by the safety tandem for the Falcons. And he went into, he kind of waxed poetic about Simmons, and, he went into their background. He was very impressed by what they've put together in their secondary. And that also led to him talking about Raheem Morris. And that's the other thing that came up in the press conference, particularly when you look at this first game, is that the level of familiarity that the staffs have with each other is an advantage in the situation in this game where you're going into a game where you don't have a lot of film on your opponent. So what you're going to see in this game is you're going to see both coaching staffs attack tendencies. They have a very good idea of what Arthur Smith wants to do, what he wants to get accomplished, what he likes, and vice versa. The Steelers know Raheem Morris very well. There were a couple other coaches that he mentioned as well. Tomlin mentioned that he had some knowledge of. But right now, as much as anything else, this is going to be a matchup of coaching staffs as much as it is players, because there's just not a lot of meat on the bone when it comes to the teams and what the teams like to do, what they've been doing, how they're going to attack it schematically, what you're going to see. Sure, they'll have, some standpoint from a very basic standpoint, but there's going to be some nuance and some detail that they just don't have in this game because it's the first game. And looking at the depth chart really quickly for the Falcons, on the defensive side of the ball, that safety tandem again with Bates and Simmons, he went on back and forth about those guys and waxed poetic about Matthew Judon. And looking at the coaching staff, the coaches that he named, Mike Tomlin specifically, when he was doing his breakdown and his level of familiarity was with Raheem Morris, with Jimmy Lake, his familiarity with Zach Robinson, having played the Rams. So he said he felt comfortable with what he thinks he's going to get. And it's always a guessing game every week. But in that first week, you don't have a lot of information. So in that first week, you've got to play really sound football, and you can't shoot yourself in the foot. You can't make those type of mistakes. This is a type of game where if you cannot turn it over, not get into some bad down and distance situations, keep Russell Wilson upright, be able to run the football, and be able to manage that down and distance, you have a very good shot of winning. It's going to be tough in that dome. It's going to be tough on the road. It's going to be very tough for a new offensive line. Some of the other things that he talked about in his press conference, Mike Tomlin, again, you're checking out the new standard, and we're breaking down the Steelers versus the Falcons week 1 as the Steelers travel in week 1 to Atlanta to play the Dirty Birds he talked a lot about Kirk Cousins as well. And he talked a lot about Bijan Robinson as well. And he just talked about the level of professionalism of Kirk Cousins, how Kirk Cousins gets their outfit in and out of good plays, doesn't put the ball in harm's way, and is going to get them in and out of some stuff that they don't or shouldn't be in. This is a tough spot. On the flip side, although Russell Wilson is a veteran guy, it's a new system, a largely new offensive line, and a new coordinator. And this is the first time that they're going to be going into battle together. The same could be said for Atlanta, because this is the first time that Kirk Cousins will be playing when the bullets are real, when the bullets are flying in his direction. So this is going to be a very interesting game. This is going to be a game where I honestly think the team that plays clean football and doesn't make as many mistakes, and I know that's pretty general, will have a good chance of winning this game. The other name that stood out for him was Bijan Robinson. He really loves Bijan Robinson. Tate, he is Mike Tomlin, and he just flat out said, sustaining and containing Bijan Robinson will be critical for them winning the football game. And that sounds obvious, but it is. I mean, and that's what he gives you in the press conference. He gives you kind of the obvious. He's not going to paint the picture as to how they're going to do it, but he's going to give you the obvious. He's going to give you some of those. That's why I think finally that I come to the conclusion, and thanks to Neil, that the press conference is very important. The interesting thing about the press conference as well is he was a little bit dismissive of Kyle Pitts and Kyle Pitts' ability to wreck the game. He specifically pointed out to a number of tight ends in the AFC North and felt very comfortable in dealing with the issue of Kyle Pitts. Another name that popped up for him was Drake London. That was a name that he felt specifically. He talked about their pedigree, that they're first round guys, that these are guys that could wreck a game, and that these are guys that they have to focus on. He also talked about Ray McLeod and his impact in the return game. But this is a game, again, where the Steelers have to play very clean football. Now, I don't know, and correct me if I'm wrong, if you're listening to the show right now. Again, you're checking out the new standard Steelers versus Falcons breakdown. Hit me with a like and subscribe. I am not, let me know if, and I haven't heard Tomlin say, because a lot of in the press conference, he hadn't determined who was going to be the starting offensive line. And that's going to be interesting. Because I'm thinking it's going to be Broderick Jones, Daniels, Zach Frazier, Spencer Anderson, and Dan Moore. I would be surprised if Big Troy starts, just because I think that's a tough spot to throw the rookie in, who has not played a lot of ball, to throw him in on the road in that setup. I think that's tough. So I don't think he's going to get the start. And I think it's going to be Dan Moore and Broderick Jones at the tackle. Again, I think it's going to be very important for the Steelers to run the football well, stay in third and some manageables, and really not get behind the sticks. Before we get out of here, I want to jump into the breakdown from Neil. And let me read this and pick up to Neil Coulon. Please support Neil and everything he's doing out there in all his endeavors. And Neil said the following: the absence of Isaac Seumalo will be noticeable quickly. Easily the best line, but more the issue is Dan Moore is starting to his left, and rookie Zach Frazier is snapping to his right. Adding a third lineman, making his first NFL start, Spencer Anderson at left guard, Frazier at center, and Troy Fautino, if he starts, at right tackle. We'll see. We'll see. makes a group that's high on potential but low on experience, both in the league and together as a unit, an even bigger liability. That's a great point. They don't have many reps together. So it's going to be very interesting to see what he does. And I don't know what I'm going to read necessarily if Broderick Jones doesn't start. I'm not willing to say he's in the doghouse. It's going to be interesting to see how that situation plays out with Broderick Jones. It's too soon to give up on the young player. Um, Neil also said offense will struggle, won't be enough for a road win over a quality veteran quarterback. So let's get to predictions. Neil predicted the Falcons would win the game 27-20. And I'm thinking that the Falcons win this game 23-17. I think this is a tough spot on the road with that much, with an offensive line that's so piecemeal. Maybe if they were going into this game with their starting offensive line, maybe I picked them. There's still some issues at the number 2 wide receiver position. I think it'll be a good game. I think it'll be a close game, highly contested game. Uh, this will be a game that's tough. It'll be kind of. I don't think it'll be a clean game either. I think there's going to be some penalty issues, particularly with that offensive line being in a hostile environment, a loud environment for the first time with a new signal caller. I think it's going to be I think it's a tough spot for the Steelers to win the game because of all these different elements and these different things. But I think it's a tough game. But I think the Falcons will cover. I believe the spread's 3.5, and I think they win the game 23-17. But with that, we're going to conclude the program, and we're going to have a post-game show right after the show. Right after the game. We'll have a post-game show probably about 1:15, 1:20. We'll jump into the show and break down what happened on the game. But with that, we're going to conclude the program. And as always, tune in, tell a friend, and subscribe. Go Steelers. Welcome to the 2024-25 NFL season. Let's go.